Hey everybody, and welcome back. This time we're going to be taking a look at 5 creepy unsolved mysteries that took place on Halloween. Doesn't get much scarier than that. So, as we approach the day of trick-or-treaters, has anyone ever asked a kid for a trick, by the way? Never mind, you might get arrested. As we approach the day of shitty candy and shittier costumes, let's take a look at some of the most disturbing, creepy unsolved mysteries that happened on the spookiest day of the year. In 1982, 69-year-old Marvin Brandland and his wife Ethel in Fort Dodge, Iowa, were settling down to just another Halloween night. They were handing out candy to trick-or-treaters who came to their house. I usually just turn the light off and pretend not to be home. To each their own. At one point, they answered the door and were surprised to see a man wearing a mask. More specifically, a pillowcase with large cutout eyes. The equivalent of the old big black sack for a costume. He said, "Trick or treat. Give me your money or I'll shoot." The Brandlands thought someone was playing a Halloween prank and tried to remove the man's mask, but he wouldn't let them. Instead, the masked man entered the house and pulled out a gun. He demanded that the couple bring him down to the basement and give him all the money they had stashed in their safe. Now, very few people even knew that they had a safe in their basement. Because of this, Marvin was still convinced that a friend or family member was simply playing a Halloween trick on them. When the masked man led the Brandlands through the kitchen towards the basement, Marvin made a grab for the gun. The intruder wound up shooting Marvin in the throat. The killer then fled the house, but left behind the mask. Ethel was so traumatized by her husband's death that she died only a few months later. Over the years, an acquaintance of the Brandland family had allegedly bragged about committing the murder, so DNA testing was performed on the mask. However, there wasn't enough usable material for an adequate test, so there is still no evidence to charge the suspect, and Marvin Brandland's murder still remains unsolved. On Halloween night in 2002, Chris Jenkins and friends visited a party before heading to a place called the Lone Tree Bar and Grill to drink away the night. The bar was in downtown Minneapolis, where Chris was attending school at the University of Minnesota. The group arrived at approximately 10:30 p.m., and around an hour and a half later, Jenkins was removed by security and banned from returning. He was never seen alive again. The area around the Lone Tree was not an ideal place to be alone. It had a bad reputation. A private investigator was hired by the family, who was told by a witness that on the same night a large group of men attacked a lone person just across the street from the bar where Chris was last seen. 2 different scent tracking dogs on separate days picked up Chris's trail on the sidewalk where the attack was alleged to have taken place, and followed it to the same spot inside the parking garage next door, where a few drops of blood and a single red feather were found. The feather may have been from Jenkins' costume, but the trail came to a halt in that spot. Chris Jenkins was found 4 months later, floating in the Mississippi River. Sound familiar? He is purportedly one of the victims of the smiley-faced killer. However, 16 years later, and no one knows what happened to Chris Jenkins that night. David Stone was a successful stock market analyst making good money in a stable career, who was big into the New Age movement, and, by all accounts, was a well-adjusted, intelligent person. However, a few days before Halloween of 1988, He left his home when a heated argument with a party guest turned violent, which people say was completely out of character for David. David Stone was seen on Highway 80 and apparently set off on foot into the desert. He was spotted by witnesses several times that day, including a farmer who found him wandering around on his property, noting that he was dressed inappropriately for the cold weather, while muttering something about being in search of the beast, before vanishing for good. His car was found on November 5th, off the same highway. Searchers headed north from the location of the car and found two pyramids fashioned out of rocks, and surrounded by a triangle with David's Rolex watch lying next to one of them. 3 miles further north, they found a Fibonacci sequence, a number pattern used in stock analysis, etched into the soil. This one, however, ended in 18 rather than the standard 21. Bloodhounds were able to track David's scent along Highway 80, 13 miles north from where his car was abandoned, but the trail went cold. His family found a very strange note inside the car. They think the word is in the safe. 6 knives in Rob's room. Use buys your tea and use take your chances Halloween. 2 hikers found David Stone's remains in the desert in 1992, 4 years after he went missing. Despite having no idea what caused his behavior or how or why he died, there was no sign of any foul play. On Halloween night, 1977, the parents of 19-month-old Nima Louise Carter placed their child inside her crib. The next morning, Nima's parents were horrified to discover that she was missing. A month later, a group of kids were playing in an abandoned house 4 blocks away from the Carter home. When they opened up the house's refrigerator, they found the decomposed body of the infant. Nima Louise Carter died of suffocation. Interestingly, a similar crime occurred in April 1976 in the same town, when a pair of 3-year-old twin sisters, Mary and Tina, were lured out of their home by a young woman and forced inside a refrigerator at another abandoned house. When the sisters were found 2 days later, Mary had suffocated, but Tina managed to survive. Tina identified her abductor as a local teenage babysitter named Jacqueline Robideau. However, the child's age made her testimony unreliable, and there wasn't enough corroborating evidence to file charges at the time. Jacqueline Robideau eventually became a babysitter for Nima Louise Carter. She was an obvious suspect after Nima's murder, but once again, there was no evidence to implicate her. Years later, Robideau was finally charged with Mary's death and given a life sentence. She died in prison of liver cancer in 2005, but never admitted to the still unsolved murder of Nima Louise Carter. On Halloween in 1955, Marilyn Damon took her 2-year-old son Stephen and 7-month-old daughter Pamela to a supermarket in East Meadow, New York. While she went shopping, Marilyn let Stephen wait outside the store with his sister, who was inside a carriage. 10 minutes later, Marilyn left the store and was horrified to discover that both Stephen and the carriage were gone. Shortly after, the carriage was discovered about 1.5 blocks away. However, even though Pamela had been left behind inside the carriage, Stephen was nowhere to be found, and he has not been found since. In many cases where infants are abducted, it's theorized that the perpetrator wanted a child of their own, and decided to raise the missing infant under a new name. Over the years, DNA testing has been done in an attempt to determine if Stephen Damon was ever given a new identity. At one point, investigators noticed that Stephen bore a resemblance to the infamous boy in the box. However, DNA testing would eventually confirm that Stephen and the boy in the box were not the same person. In 2009, a Michigan man named John Barnes came forward believing he might be Stephen, but DNA testing also ruled this out. It is possible that an adult Stephen might be living another life under a different identity, unaware that he was once taken from his real family. However, his whereabouts continued to remain unknown. If alive, he would be 63 years old by now. So, there you have it. Some disturbing unsolved murders and creepy disappearances for you this Halloween. Happy Halloween. Thanks for watching. Mike out.